Most people remember Gregory Sierra as Julio Fuentes, the quick-witted neighbor who became one of the most memorable parts of Sanford and Son. Others remember the powerful performances that helped make him a television icon, but the characters he played were nothing compared to the man he really was. Behind the cameras was a man whose real life was far more unbelievable than anything he ever portrayed on screen. Long before Hollywood discovered him, Sierra grew up in some of New York's toughest neighborhoods, navigating hardship, loss, and a constant fight to find where he belonged. Then, after finally making it to the top, he developed one of the most controversial reputations in the entertainment industry. Behind his remarkable career were bitter feuds, shocking decisions, heartbreaking personal tragedy, and secrets that rarely made the headlines. And once you discover who Gregory Sierra really was, when the cameras stopped rolling, you'll never look at his legacy the same way again. Gregory Sierra's dangerous background. Gregory Sierra was born on January 25, 1937, in Manhattan's Spanish Harlem, a neighborhood that was known for its vibrant Puerto Rican culture and its high rates of poverty and crime. His earliest years were marked by instability, but nothing prepared him for what happened when he was 6 years old. His immediate family dissolved completely. His parents abandoned him, leaving the young boy to fend for himself in a city that had no sympathy for orphaned children. He was sent to live with his aunt, who became his primary caregiver, but the wound of being rejected by his own mother and father never fully healed. The abandonment shaped everything that came after. His aunt raised him in a rough, predominantly Irish enclave of New York City. The streets were controlled by ethnic gangs, and the boy with the Puerto Rican last name did not fit in easily. He was an outsider in his own neighborhood, alienated from his cultural roots by the simple geography of where his aunt could afford to live. The Irish kids did not accept him. The Puerto Rican kids were blocks away, separated by invisible lines that meant violence if crossed. This environment forced Gregory into early survival mode. He learned to fight before he learned to read. He learned to watch his back before he learned to trust anyone. The identity struggle that began in those years would follow him for the rest of his life, a quiet war between who he was and who the world expected him to be. As a teenager, Sierra lived a striking double life that sounds like fiction, but was entirely real. By day, he attended the Cathedral College of the Immaculate Conception in Brooklyn, a highly strict preparatory school for young boys who were considering the Catholic priesthood. He wore the uniform, studied the scriptures, and learned the rituals of the church. The priests who taught him saw a quiet, serious boy who might have a calling. By night, Gregory shed the uniform and ran with violent New York street gangs. He was not a spectator, he was a participant. He fought, he stole, and he survived in a world where the wrong look could get you in trouble. His involvement in gang life eventually led him into dangerous conflicts that nearly cost him his life before it had truly begun. During one violent confrontation, he suffered a serious injury and narrowly survived. The experience became a major turning point for him. Gregory later reflected on the contradiction of his life at the time, spending his nights involved in gang disputes while studying theology during the day. He realized the two paths could not continue side by side forever. Something had to change, and he knew that if he did not walk away from that life, he might not get another chance. Quick break. I want to share something with you before we continue. Your brain produces toxic waste every single day as you think and remember. Every night while you sleep, a dedicated system is supposed to flush all of it out. After 50, that system slows down, not because of aging, but because of 6 specific things that block it. Every one of them is fixable. Go to brainresearchreport.com right now and take a look, or it's linked in the description if that's easier. This is one of those things that makes a real difference. All right, back to the video. Seeking an escape from New York's violent streets, Sierra served a full enlistment in the United States Air Force. The military gave him structure, discipline, and a reason to leave the neighborhood behind. He learned that he was capable of more than fighting and surviving. He learned that he could be something other than a gang member or a priest. When his enlistment ended, he returned to New York without a clear plan. He did not know what he wanted to do with his life. He just knew that he did not want to go back to the old neighborhood. The discovery of acting happened by accident. Sierra walked into a Manhattan acting school audition purely to provide moral support to a friend. He had no intention of trying out himself. He was just there to cheer his buddy on. But the instructor noticed him sitting in the back of the room. The instructor asked Sierra to try an impromptu improvisation, just for fun, just to see what would happen. Sierra got up and performed, and the room went quiet. The school rejected his friend and immediately admitted Sierra. The friend was gracious, but the irony was not lost on either of them. Gregory had stumbled into his calling without even looking for it. He honed his craft as a heavy dramatic actor, spending years touring the United States with the National Shakespeare Company. He performed major classical roles, including the tragic Scottish lord in Macbeth and the star-crossed lover in Romeo and Juliet. He played the Duke of Austria in King John at the prestigious New York Shakespeare Festival in 1967. The same hands that had participated in gang fights now held scripts. The same voice that had shouted territorial threats in Spanish Harlem now spoke the verse of the bard. Acting became his salvation, the one place where his violent past and his artistic present could coexist. In 1973, Sierra guest starred on All in the Family in an episode that would make television history. The episode was called Archie is Branded. Sierra played Paul Benjamin, an intense, militant Jewish extremist who protects the Bunker family from neo-Nazis. The character was angry, wounded, and dangerous, not because he wanted to be, but because the world had made him that way. Sierra poured his own childhood abandonment and street survival into the performance. The result was so jarring and so emotionally raw that the producers made an unprecedented decision. The episode ended in absolute dead silence. There was no closing theme music and no audience applause, just the image of Benjamin's car exploding, and then nothing. It remains the only episode in the history of All in the Family to end that way. Shortly after that performance, Sierra was cast as Julio Fuentes, the lovable, friendly Puerto Rican neighbor on Sanford and Son. He appeared in only 12 episodes over 3 seasons, but his impact was enormous. His sharp comedic timing and strict poise completely revolutionized the dynamic of the show. Fred Sanford, played by Red Fox, built his comedy on hurling insults at anyone who crossed his path. But Julio did not react with anger. He did not storm off. He simply smiled, fired back a sharper insult, and left Fred speechless. Sierra's performance turned the jokes on their head, proving that the immigrant neighbor was smarter, cooler, and more dignified than the man who mocked him. He was a master scene stealer, and audiences loved him. But the man who played Julio Fuentes was nothing like the friendly neighbor on screen. Gregory Sierra had a reputation in Hollywood that scared people, and the stories about what he was known for are only now coming to light. Gregory Sierra's controversial reputation. In 1975, ABC network executives used strict contract leverage to pressure Sierra into joining the original ensemble cast of Barney Miller as Detective Sergeant Chano Amengual. The show was a workplace sitcom set in a New York City police precinct, and the producers wanted Sierra's intensity to ground the comedy. But Sierra did not want a permanent ensemble position. He had spent years building a career as a guest star and character actor, and he was not interested in being tied down to a weekly series. Creator Danny Arnold pacified him by promising to quickly build a solo starring vehicle around him, a show that would put Sierra front and center. Sierra agreed to sign, but he did so with a sense of being trapped. The promise was the only thing that kept him from walking away before the first episode even aired. Once filming began, the problems started immediately. Sierra's raw, hyper-realistic dramatic style routinely disrupted the lighthearted pacing of the sitcom. While the other actors were playing for laughs, Sierra was playing for truth. He delivered his lines with an intensity that made the comedy feel secondary. In a landmark episode where Detective Chano kills 2 bank robbers in the line of duty, Sierra delivered a harrowing, unglamorous, weeping psychological breakdown on screen. He did not play the moment as a triumph. He played it as a tragedy. His character sat in a chair, trembling, tears streaming down his face, unable to process what he had done. The performance was brilliant, but it caused a problem for the show. Sierra's intensity completely overshadowed the show's lead, Hal Linden. Linden was a polished professional actor who played the precinct captain as a calm, measured presence. He was the anchor of the show. But in the aftermath of Chano's breakdown, the audience was not talking about Linden. They were talking about Sierra. The show's writers, recognizing that Sierra's character was hijacking the series, actively restricted his focal time. They wrote scenes that kept Chano in the background. They gave him fewer lines. They reduced his role because they were afraid that he would make the show into something it was not supposed to be. The bitter feud with Danny Arnold boiled over backstage. Sierra grew furious when he discovered that ABC was prioritizing a spin-off series for Abe Vigoda's character, Detective Phil Fish, ahead of his promised show. The Fish spin-off was greenlit and put into production, while Sierra's project languished in development. He felt betrayed. He had signed the contract based on a promise, and the promise had been broken. Feeling completely underutilized and disrespected, Sierra made a decision that stunned the producers. He abruptly quit Barney Miller at the end of season 2. He walked away from a hit show, a steady paycheck, and the security that most actors spend their entire careers chasing. Creator and producer Danny Arnold was so completely enraged by Sierra's sudden walkout that he enacted an unprecedented on-screen erasure. He did not write a transfer storyline for Detective Chano. He did not give the character a formal send-off. He did not even mention that Chano was leaving. When season 3 began, the character simply vanished. No explanation, no farewell, and no acknowledgement from the other characters that their colleague had disappeared. The narrative blacklist was so absolute that viewers who missed the announcement of Sierra's departure were confused for weeks, wondering what had happened to the intense detective who had once wept over killing a man. Arnold wanted to erase Sierra's presence from the show entirely, and he succeeded. Nearly a decade later, in 1984, Sierra was cast as the original commanding officer, Lieutenant Lou Rodriguez, in the highly anticipated premiere season of Miami Vice. The show was a cultural phenomenon before it even aired, a stylish, music-driven police drama that promised to redefine the genre. Sierra was excited about the role, but the excitement faded quickly. Behind the scenes, he utterly detested living in Miami during the shoot. The heat, the humidity, the distance from his family, all of it wore on him. But his third wife later confirmed that his primary reason for quitting was not the weather or the location. It was intense, toxic friction with key individuals on the set. Sierra was a man who did not tolerate anyone that didn't meet his standards, and he found himself surrounded by people who he felt did not share his commitment to the craft. Desperate to break his contract and walk away from a massive, guaranteed financial windfall, Sierra took an unusual step. He personally begged the executive producers to permanently execute his character. He wanted out so badly that he was willing to be killed off on screen, a decision that would ensure he could never be called back. The producers agreed. His character, Lieutenant Lou Rodriguez, was eliminated by an assassin in the 4th episode of the series. The death was sudden, brutal, and final. Sierra walked away from Miami Vice before the show even found its footing, making way for Edward James Olmos to join the cast as the iconic Lieutenant Martin Castillo. Sierra's reputation for being an incredibly high-impact, independent actor who refused to sign long-term ensemble contracts earned him a unique legacy in the entertainment industry. He was famously dubbed the king of the and Gregory Sierra billing. Producers who wanted his talent but knew they could not tie him down for multiple seasons would place his name as the final, prestigious, high-paying, standalone credit in opening titles. The phrase "and Gregory Sierra" signified a top-tier guest presence, an actor who would deliver a memorable performance for 1 or 2 episodes and then disappear, leaving the audience wanting more. It was a billing reserved for actors who commanded respect, and Sierra earned it more often than almost anyone. But the controversies and the feuds and the walkouts were not the whole story. Behind the professional battles, Gregory Sierra was carrying a weight that no amount of acting could prepare him for. The devastation that awaited him off-screen would scar him for life, and the tragedy that struck his family was worse than anything he had ever faced on the streets of Spanish Harlem. The tragedy he never recovered from. Following his departure from Barney Miller, Danny Arnold finally delivered the promised spin-off. The show was called AES Hudson Street, a medical sitcom that cast Sierra as the lead star, Dr. Tony Menzies. He was supposed to be the center of attention, the face of the show, the actor that audiences tuned in to see. The promise that had been made to him years earlier was finally being fulfilled. Sierra prepared for the role with his characteristic intensity, pouring himself into the character and hoping that this would be his breakthrough. Unfortunately, the show was an expensive, disastrous failure. ABC canceled AES Hudson Street after airing only 5 episodes. The ratings were abysmal. The critics were unkind. The chemistry that had made Sierra a scene stealer on Barney Miller did not translate to leading man status. The spin-off that was supposed to launch him into the stratosphere crashed and burned instead. His solo star financial prospects, which had seemed so promising just months earlier, were completely ruined. He had walked away from a hit show for this. He had trusted the promise for this, and now he had nothing. On May 16, 1976, at the height of his sitcom fame, Sierra married his second wife, Susan Joyce Pollock. The wedding was a happy occasion, a celebration of love and new beginnings. Friends and family gathered to watch the couple exchange vows. The photographs from that day show Sierra smiling, relaxed, and hopeful. He had survived the streets, survived the military, and survived the bitter feuds of Hollywood. He believed that he had finally found peace, but the relationship was intensely volatile behind closed doors. The marriage that looked so happy from the outside was marred by severe psychological battles. Friends later described arguments that escalated quickly, silences that stretched for days, and a sense that both partners were struggling with personal problems that the other could not understand. By late 1977, after a grueling series of domestic disputes, Susan explicitly demanded a formal separation. She wanted out. She needed space. Sierra agreed, hoping that time apart would heal whatever was broken between them. In January of 1978, exactly 2 weeks into the high-stress shooting of AES Hudson Street, Susan Pollock died under extremely tragic circumstances. The news fractured the television production. Crew members stood in shocked silence as the word spread across the set. Sierra, who had been in the middle of filming a scene, was pulled aside and told what had happened. The man who had played a weeping, traumatized detective on Barney Miller was now living that trauma in real life. He did not cry on camera. He did not have a breakdown in front of the crew. He simply went quiet, and the silence was worse than any outburst could have been. Unlike many Hollywood stars who hid their personal scandals behind publicists and press agents, Sierra was brutally candid with the public about the tragedy. In an emotional 1978 press interview, he sat before reporters and told them the truth. He confessed that because he and Susan were separated at her request, her sudden death left him completely hollowed out. He carried an overpowering, lifelong sense of personal guilt that he felt in every future role he played. He wondered if he could have done something differently. He wondered if he had missed the signs. He wondered if his own struggles with anger and intensity had pushed her away when she needed him most. The guilt consumed him. He did not try to hide it or pretend that he was okay. He told interviewers that a part of him died with Susan, and that the part that remained was not the same man who had walked down the aisle on May 16, 1976. He stopped trusting himself. He stopped trusting his judgment. He threw himself into his work not because he loved acting, but because working was the only thing that kept him from thinking about what he had lost. The tragedy of Susan Pollock's death was the defining event of Gregory Sierra's life. Everything that came before was prologue. Everything that came after was an epilogue. The street fights, the gang warfare, the studio feuds, none of it compared to the weight of waking up every morning knowing that his wife had been a victim of her mental health struggles while they were separated. He carried that weight into every audition, every performance, and every interview. He carried it until the day he died. The man who had been the most dangerous actor in Hollywood was, in the end, just a man who had lost someone he loved. The danger that had defined his reputation was a shell, a protective layer that he built around a heart that had been shattered. He carried the devastating knowledge that the woman he married could not stay, and that her departure was final in a way that no script could ever capture. In the years that followed, Sierra continued to work. He took roles when they were offered. He did his job and went home. But the fire that had made him so compelling on screen was dimmed. The intensity that had once overshadowed Hal Linden was now turned inward, a private grief that he shared with no one except the reporters who asked the right questions. The tragedy of Susan Pollock's death would follow him to his own final days, and the story of how Gregory Sierra left this world is as heartbreaking as anything he ever performed. The tragic death of Gregory Sierra. Sierra worked consistently across 5 decades, amassing over 130 film and television credits. He appeared in major motion pictures like Papillon in 1973, the star-studded disaster film The Towering Inferno in 1974, and the beloved science fiction series Star Trek Deep Space Nine in 1994. He worked alongside some of the biggest names in the industry, from Steve McQueen to Paul Newman to William Shatner. He never stopped being a working actor. He never stopped showing up, learning his lines, and delivering performances that made audiences remember his name. But in 2018, his career was forced to a sudden, involuntary halt. Sierra was in his early 80s, and his body had begun to fail him in ways that he could not control. While he retained his passion for acting, the same passion that had driven him since that accidental audition in Manhattan, he began suffering from aggressive memory deterioration. The condition made it completely impossible for him to memorize scripts. The man who had once delivered complex Shakespearean soliloquies and emotionally raw sitcom breakdowns could no longer remember a single page of dialogue. He tried to keep working. He tried to find ways around the problem, but the scripts would not stay in his head, and he knew that he could not show up on a set unprepared. He quietly withdrew from the industry, telling only his closest friends and family. The public did not know. The fans did not know. The man who had been a television fixture for 5 decades simply faded away. He spent his final years completely removed from the Hollywood limelight, residing in the retirement community of Laguna Woods, California. The town was quiet, sunny, and far removed from the chaotic streets of Spanish Harlem or the pressure cooker soundstages of Los Angeles. He lived a simple life, keeping to himself, reading when he could, and reflecting on the strange journey that had taken him from an abandoned child to a television icon. It was there that his body began to fail him in an even more devastating way. Sierra fought a brutal, agonizingly prolonged medical battle against not one but 2 forms of cancer simultaneously. He was diagnosed with both stomach cancer and liver cancer, a double blow that would have crushed a lesser man. The treatments were grueling. The chemotherapy drained his energy. The surgeries left him weak and bedridden. He spent months in and out of hospitals, surrounded by the beeping machines and the sterile white walls that he had once pretended to inhabit on medical dramas. But this was not acting. This was real, and the scripts for this final performance offered no happy endings. On January 4, 2021, Gregory Sierra succumbed to complications from liver and stomach cancer. He was 83 years old. The man who had survived street gangs, studio feuds, and the tragic death of his wife had finally run out of fights to win. In strict alignment with his deeply private, unpretentious nature, there was no lavish Hollywood funeral or public viewing. He did not want a parade of celebrities eulogizing him on the news. He did not want fans camped outside a church, crying for cameras. He wanted to disappear as quietly as he had lived. His body was cremated, and his ashes were kept by his family. There was no grave for fans to visit and no monument to leave flowers at. In a final testament to how much he flew under Hollywood's superficial radar, his passing was kept so quiet by his family that major entertainment news outlets did not even discover or report his death until nearly 3 weeks later. On January 22, 2021, the news finally broke. The headlines were brief, respectful, and tinged with a kind of sadness that reporters do not always show. Gregory Sierra was gone, and most of the world did not even know it. When the news finally spread, tributes poured in from television historians and fellow actors. They did not celebrate him as a standard sitcom caricature, the funny neighbor from Sanford and Son or the intense detective from Barney Miller. They celebrated him as a fearless, towering trailblazer who injected raw, multi-dimensional realism and uncompromising dignity into Latino representation at a time when Hollywood was still heavily pushing flat, offensive stereotypes. Before Sierra, Puerto Rican characters were often criminals or servants. Before Sierra, Latino actors were given one-dimensional roles that required them to speak in broken English and play the fool. Sierra refused to play those roles. He demanded dignity, and he got it. Up until his final days, Sierra maintained a deeply grounded, stoic perspective on his turbulent life. He consistently rejected the glitz of Hollywood fame, often reminding interviewers that he had survived childhood abandonment, the street gangs of New York, and immense personal grief. He viewed his entire acting career merely as a fortunate, strange accident rather than a status symbol. He did not believe that he deserved special treatment because he was on television. He did not believe that his fame made him better than anyone else. He was a man who had been given a second chance, and then a third, and then a fourth, and he never forgot that the odds had been stacked against him from the beginning. Gregory Sierra was one of the most dangerous actors in Hollywood, not because he was violent or unpredictable on set, but because he was willing to walk away from everything. He walked away from Barney Miller at its peak. He walked away from Miami Vice before it became a phenomenon. He walked away from contracts that would have made him rich because he refused to compromise his integrity. He walked away from the Hollywood machine that wanted to put him in a box and label him a funny neighbor or an ethnic stereotype. And in the end, he walked away from life itself, quietly, without fanfare, without a Hollywood ending. But the characters he played, the barriers he broke, and the dignity he demanded will outlive us all. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen. Like and subscribe to our channel for more updates.